I really like the aesthetics of these old classic house sounds, but in a way I also feel like it's important to add something new to your productions and create some of your own sounds. And luckily there are a few nice sound design techniques that help you to do that quite easily. And in this video we're going to take a look at one which might even be my favorite sound design technique. So let's jump right in. Let's take a quick listen to a few sounds that might be useful to create house music with them. And we're going to start with these synth keys right here. Nice synthy key sound. Up next we have this fat moog bass. Really nice fat solid bass sound, right? We have another bass sound, kind of a synthy subby electric bass. And then lastly, we have these strings right here. So a pretty nice variation of different types of sounds, but they all have something very fundamental in common. And that's that they're all made from the same Conga sample, this one right here. Because if we take a look in the simpler, this would be just the Conga. It's called D2 Conga 15L. If we jump into the simplers of these sounds right here, you will see that the basis of the sounds is just a very small part of the Conga sample, the same Conga sample. So this would be the keys, right? If we jump into the sub bass or the moog bass, it's also just a small part of the Conga sample. And same is true for the electric bass and the strings. So all of these sounds were created using the same simple sound design technique. And that's picking a very short part of a sample, can be pretty much any sample, I would say, looping that short part in order to create a unique waveform, and then using that waveform as a basis to create your sounds. Let's actually take a look at this example because I think things will be a lot more clear. So we have the Conga sound that we just talked about, and I created this very generic bass line. Let's pitch this down a bit, like 20 semitones in order to get a more bassy sound. And before we get started, I'm just going to do a very simple synthesis setup where we modulate the filter. So I'm going to bring up the filter modulation amount and bring the cutoff frequency to 300 Hertz or 285 is fine. If you don't know these basic synthesis techniques, check out these videos, which I'm linking here or also putting in the description, because I cannot go into too much detail on this right now. But now we have this sound, right? Let's bring in some drums. Turn on the loop and make the sample shorter. And start here and bring it here. Bring down the pitch even more. Some resonance. And just like that, we turned a conga into a cool bass sound. And what's happening here is we're kind of picking a part which is similar to a saw wave. That's why it sounds kind of like a saw wave. But because we have this kind of weird waveform which isn't exactly like a saw wave, you will get a kind of unique sound. And you can use this to create many cool bass sounds depending on where you put this little loop that you're selecting. So in a way you have a mix between granular synthesis or wavetable synthesis because you have these different waveforms to choose from. Let's actually look at this spectrogram to show you how you can really customize your waveforms this way. And something that I mentioned before is that the pitch kind of changes. So the thing is, the shorter you make your loop, the higher your frequencies will get. And the longer you make your loop, the lower the frequencies will get. I'm going to explain this in more detail in a second as well, but let's first create some bass sounds. So you can kind of try to find one cycle. Let's say we're starting at this crossover point and we're going to this crossover point. Now we have something that's kind of almost closer to a sine wave than a saw wave, right? That's why we will get a pretty strong bass fundamental and then some overtones. So if we bring up the filter a bit, cool. If we bring this to the points where there are peaks, you will get something like an instant click, which will remind you of a saw wave, right? So we are more like a saw wave, but we're still kind of metallic, right? So let's try around a bit more. Wow, here. So we're at a cross point and then going there. Bring down the filter down again. Nice. But what's cool here is you can see the overtones have kind of a weird structure. They're not flat as they would be in a normal saw wave. So you kind of get a unique sound that's going to be difficult to replicate. And at the beginning of the Conga sample, for example, we have this noisy click. If we actually use that, let's turn off the filter, or let's bring up. You will see, wow, okay. Now we get something that even sounds almost like FM. Like a bit more noisy. You have these 2 points at the beginning with like, or 2 resonances at the beginning with evenly distributed energy. And then you have some other stuff happening. So this is like a cool, maybe a bit less. So it's pretty nice. I hope, I mean, I'm just playing around a bit randomly, but wow. Oh, maybe a bit low. Let's play it a bit higher. This is also cool. We're getting a waveform which leaves us some sub bass, like around 40 hertz, but then has these 2 strong peaks here. Can also be a very nice, strong bass sound. And let's go back here. What happens if we do that? Similar situation. So the closer we get to our normal saw wave, the more we sound like an actual Moog bass. But this still has character. Like someone will hear this and be like, ah, how did he process this bass? You didn't process it. You just like picked this random waveform. So there are many things that you can do with this. But okay, so why is the pitch constantly changing? I actually recently saw a pretty cool reel explaining this, why rhythm is the same as pitch. And to demonstrate that, I actually have this little impulse over here, which I also picked from the Conga sample that we have. So we're playing this loop right now, just like with the technique before. We have a hit in a specific time interval. And a time interval is a frequency. Just like, for example, a BPM, beats per minute, is technically a frequency, just that you're using minutes instead of seconds. So a frequency is how many hits do you have per second. And so here we have this interval. The shorter we make the loop, the higher the frequency of the hits, right? So the closer we go, we increase the frequency at which this hit is playing, this impulse. At a certain point, we won't be able to distinguish the single impulses anymore because the frequency is so high that it just sounds like one sound and we will perceive it as pitch. See what happens. Get closer. Now it starts sounding like one sound. So we're literally increasing the frequency at which this thing is playing, which will increase the pitch. And the same thing happens if we apply this technique, right? So we're back at our Conga sample. Oh, which one did we have? Over here. All right, suck. We have to... So the same thing happens over here. The closer we get, the higher the frequency gets. So we can also use that as for effect sounds and stuff. But something, or the reason I'm telling you this is that if you want to make normal music and you create your sounds and you're trying around and you have a track in a specific key, you might have to tune your sound afterwards. So let's say we have this, we create a bass sound. Let's bring down the filter. So quickly to create a cool bass sound. So we have this very nice subby sound. I'm playing on my keyboard in A. Let me actually, this is actually close, luckily close, but I'm gonna play a C. And over here, it's a D. So let me go into the controls. I could do it here as well, but let me go in the controls, transpose it down by 2. Okay, now I guess it's still 22 cents flat. Let's bring this up by 22. Okay, now we're playing pretty much a C. So now we tuned our sound in a way that we can actually use it in our normal productions, right? Okay, I hope this helped a bit. Let's actually look at the sounds which I showed you before. So we had these synth keys, right? As you can see, I also just have a very short part, because in a way we're creating something like a saw wave, which you can use for key sounds as well. So this is our sound already, kind of a cool waveform. It's somewhat like a saw wave, but not exactly. Let's play a chord. Your classic synth sound. Some erosion on there. A bit of form and shifting, but then really the jam comes from a chorus. And then this free phaser from Native Instruments. Okay. That's what I played, I think. Nice. Okay. Moog bass we already kind of covered, right? This was the Moog sound. Nice and dirty. And then for this sound, the difference, like in this electric sub, just a different waveform and then less filter modulation. Bit of drive, some filter distortion, and that's that. And then for the strings, lastly, I tried to pick a part which was mainly like a kind of like a saw wave. I experimented around a bit, and then lots of reverb, delay, choruses, and some phasing, and a plate in the end, which will create this sound. So I think it's a cool, useful technique that's definitely worth playing around with. Of course, like any technique, it has its limits, but I feel like if you're trying around with different loops and different sounds also, we just used the conga loop for now, you can create some cool sounds with it. Classic sounds that have your own twist, or just more complex sounds depending on what samples you use. I encourage you to try different things out. In my last video, many people asked about a snap sound like this. It's a cool snap sound. If you're one of the people looking for that sound, you can head over to my Instagram page. There's a link tree in my bio, which will lead you to some free downloads. And I made sure to put some cool snap sounds, including ones like these in there. And besides that, I'm looking forward to see you in the next one. Peace.